Welcome back, crew. We're wrapping up January with a review of Paizo's amazing Pathfinder 2e system as our game of the month. So we're going to be going through our roses, thorns, and buds. And if this is your first time watching the channel, I stole that from my favorite tabletop podcast, Not Another D&D podcast. Shout out to the two crew. And we're going to be going through our likes, roses, dislikes, thorns, buds, which are things we're excited for in the future. And as always, the channel, things you can take away and apply to other systems. So, cool thing with this one though, usually after we do the game of the review and kind of move on to the next month, we kind of don't have enough time to cover older systems. But Pathfinder 2e is going to be one of my weekly games now. It's my, fortunately, it's my only game that's not streamed. I may try to stream a few in the future though. So with that, we're going to see more Pathfinder 2e videos come up in the future as I just go through cool things or things I may enjoy with it or learn something new and think it's worth sharing. So stay tuned for that. But let's dive into it. I really like this system. Super happy with it, but let's get the roses out of the way first. So one of my biggest roses, and especially with all the OGL controversy and all that mess, is that the Pathfinder 2e rules, and I think all of Paizo's rules for like these Starfinders the same way, are free. They put them up online, completely free. You can go to Archives of Nexus or Demiplane, which I use pretty frequently, and you can look up all the rules for free. So that's really nice. It's nice you can do it with officially supported means too. You don't have to do any pirating with this. So I really appreciate them for that. Especially because during as the game was going on, I was looking up stuff and it was nice and easy to find stuff. Now, one thing I will say, well, two things I will say on that. First, Paizo's an amazing company. Go through and support the creators. Even if you do find the rules online, go pick up a book or a PDF right now and just kind of support the company. They're amazing and definitely want to show some love for them. And the other thing I'll say kind of supporting that is while the rules are online, at least for me, I find it easier to read rules like kind of the way the books are formatted and pick them up and learn them. And I'm not sure if that's the same for everybody else. It may just be a me thing. But even with them being free, buy them, read them in the format they're printed in, and I think that'll be much easier for you to learn the system. So kind of both on those sides, support Paizo, and you may have an easier time learning and reading the books. And kind of all that one too, this is just a cool thing I saw recently. Pathfinder 2e, like they have sold 8 months worth of like core rulebooks in the last 2 weeks. So I'm glad Paizo's getting some love, getting some amazing sales out of this. Definitely, if you haven't, I think it's going to be a couple months if you want to get the physical copy. I'm really happy I had this on the shelf for a few years. But otherwise, you can still get the PDFs. I bought a ton of PDFs from Secrets of Magic, Advanced Player's Guide. If you're going to start DMing this, or even as a player, buy the Advanced Player's Guide. There's so much cool stuff in it. Secrets of Magic too. I like the Magus. Like that's my favorite of the classes within the system. But there's just so much cool stuff in there. Go through, pick it up, and just support Paizo. But big thing for the rules are free. Other thing along this side too, and this may vary from player to player, but this is something that I truly love and I think deserves a major shout out. I love having options when building a character, and I think Paizo does an amazing job with this. Typically, if you watched the channel before, you know I've been skewing more towards classless systems, just because I love to be able to kind of do point buy and pick all the different cool things that I want, but this scratched that same itch even within a frame of a class, because you have so many different ways you can get feats and so many different ways you can add elements to your character without having to go out of your way or sacrifice so much by multi-classing. You can build whatever you want to do just by using the core classes and then like the feats and archetypes and all of that to just add on to what you want to do. For some, I know this can be like too much choice. I think it's some analysis by paralysis or paralysis by analysis. But for me, this is amazing. It was really one of the areas I was struggling with 5e before, because I feel like unless you're playing a warlock, your fighter's going to look the same as the other fighter of that class and species. And I think Pathfinder 2e does a great job where you can have two people playing the same class and not even know it. There's so much cool stuff you can add on to it. So shout outs to them for that. I'm really like, I've been just making PCs just to play around with different things. Still gotta make a good spellcaster PC, but I've been enjoying it. So cool thing with this too, really, especially coming from, well, 5e was like one of our main systems, and even just playing around with all the different games we've done on the channel so far, I'm going to say Paizo probably does the best job I've seen of providing GM-facing resources. A lot of times because we're usually like GMs are what, like 10-20% of the player base. So it makes sense for companies to kind of cater their market towards the players who are going to be buying more stuff than DMs can buy kind of cumulatively, even though the DMs are more likely to pay money for stuff. But Paizo does such a great job of making like DM facing resources. That game mastery guide was amazing. Check out our video on that. Like there's gonna be more content coming from that. But just reading through it, I feel like it was just really designed to make it easier for the game master to run things and laid out so well that you're not having to like spend so much time analyzing it that it's almost like hurting the cause by making it difficult to understand. So you're having harder time to use its tools to make your life easier. Paizo's was not like that way. That it was super well organized, very easy to pick up, and you can kind of skim through and find what you're looking for, kind of what was on your mind at the time you opened the book. So really go highlight if you're gonna start DMing the system, go pick it up. Like I got the PDF. I'm going to be buying a hard copy soon when they get back in stock. But it's definitely worth reading, definitely worth taking some cool inspiration from. Another cool rose on this side is I like the combat. Go check out our actual play of the system. And I'm sorry for those who were watching the whole thing. I forgot to move the map on screen for the last battle, but you still got to hear our narration of it, see the rolls. So hopefully that works well for you. But yeah, it was just dynamic combat. Everything was just interesting. Most of my players are very new to the system, but especially if you see that last fight, they kind of got into it, started using rather than just attacking all three of their turns, or using some of their spells and abilities and different things like that, just really making that 3-action system work well, and just really kind of like branching in and kind of embracing the system and letting some of the role play seep in too. Because really one of the things I think Paizo and Pathfinder doesn't get enough shout outs for, because people usually think of it for its mechanic nature, but there's so many of the different actions you can take in combat that enhance the RP of the combat, but things like demoralize, feint, that one with diplomacy, I always forget the name, Bonton or Bon, I can't remember, but it's just really different things you could do. They can kind of easier bring the RP into the mechanical aspects of the combat, whereas a lot of systems you have to kind of add that flavor on your own, and sometimes it may be at odds with the mechanical nature. Pathfinder 2e marries those two, so you can have that RP, you can have that flavor, have mechanics that support them, so it's not like just you and your DM having a conversation, the DM have to kind of come up with like, I guess that will work. It's baked into the system. There's successes, failures, all of that right in there. It just makes that combat more dynamic in my view and gives the players more tools. It just lets have it, and I love having RP not take a backseat during combat, and I like that it allows you to give the tools to do that without just being on the GM's shoulders. So super big shout out for that. And kind of while we're on combat too, one of the things I'm really going to give another big shout out for is the encounter system works perfectly. So the balancing encounter system, the way they have it set up, because I was worried about that. If you've watched me on Dungeons & Masters with the Star Wars 5e channel, I've gotten very good at working with the Adventuring Day and CR balancing systems with a 5e style game. But it's one of those things that it's art and science fused together, I'll say, on that side for 5e. But with this, it's just like it worked. We had low difficulty encounter at the beginning, and it was good. I had to let people ask some questions, get into the flow of things. We had a severe encounter. I was worried about that because severe seems like it could go pretty badly, especially with new players and people that aren't used to the system and not really a party that's customized or built for teamwork. But it worked. They got through the encounter. They had one person go down, a couple people hurt, but they beat it. They killed the guys. They survived. Nobody actually died. So it was fun. It kept them on their toes. It was just enjoyable, and everything kind of went along like the lines of the description. So I enjoyed that. That was cool. I didn't have to guesstimate or just kind of throw some stuff at the wall to see what sticks. It just worked right out of the gate. And that's going to be something like I say is like a piece of advice, not a rose, thorn, or bud. Especially if you're new to the system, if you're like me, you're kind of coming over with the OGL stuff, don't try to homebrew Pathfinder right away. Like their numbers are the numbers are tight. The numbers work well, and that's how everything stays so balanced. So if you do homebrew stuff, like try not to tweak the numbers much, because the numbers matter a ton, and there's just, you don't want to break the goose. So just a piece of advice on that side, just gotta give it a few tries, and definitely change some of the flavor stuff, or maybe add more options, but don't change the numbers or change things that would switch the balance up too much. Last thing I'll say on kind of the roses, the rules are consistent, clear, and just available. I'll say there's not going to be a lot of things where you just have to completely guess, and there's not going to be a lot of things either too that just seem like they're almost at odds with each other or kind of going against what another rule says. Everything I've seen before seems to fit the rules pretty well. Like players will have abilities that allow them to kind of bypass certain rules or break the rules, but those are very clear, and it's not really things that are competing with each other, or you have to kind of go, there's not as much of having to write the system as you play with the Pathfinder 2e, so big shout out to that side. So, with that, those are my core roses for the system. I've really enjoyed this one so far. Looking forward to diving into it more. But let's get into a couple of the thorns that I had with this system, and there's not too many for it. One of mine, and if you've seen more of these videos before, what I didn't like as much is that the lore is really baked into the system. Galarian sounds sweet, which is the Pathfinder homeworld, or the base setting, I should say, for the system, but they do, especially in like the species and some of the archetypes and some of the certain things, they bake that kind of home setting into the lore a lot, and that's not something I love homebrew. I love making my own world. I think this was the first time I got to stream Kazuya, which is my favorite, which is my homebrew world. It's definitely one of my favorites to bring to the table. So it's just one of those things that, especially with the ancestries, where you feel like you have to go through and kind of break things out a little bit, and that's not my favorite. So it's a small thorn, I'll say, but it is definitely a thorn, and especially as I'm gearing up to bring my overall campaign over to the system, something I'm seeing more and more of, and will require a little bit of work to kind of pull some of that lore out, but still give players certain things. Like with my system, we've already got like the lore and all that designed for the ancestries, but definitely this kind of working, especially with some of the mechanical features you get from the ancestries and archetypes, because you still want to make sure you kind of have some background flavor within your world for those two. So it's just one of those things that adds a little bit of work to the GM's plate if you want to use a homebrew setting. But if you're playing a Galarian, it's perfect, I guess, because it gives you a lot of those tools right up front in the knowledge, and the players the knowledge too, which is always nice. So this one, I was going to say it's a thorn-ish. There is a lot to learn with the system. I don't think there's as much to learn as the system as sometimes it gets portrayed online. Pathfinder 2e is complex, but it's internally consistent, as I mentioned before. And as you learn kind of the keywords and kind of how the system flows, it gets easier and easier. But there is a lot that goes along with it, and especially it's a full system to learn. It's not like it's going to be a rules light system, so it is something you're going to have to pick up, and it's going to take practice and time to get into. As I said, it's thornish. I don't think that's a bad thing. It's definitely something that the more you play, the more comfortable you get. But if it's one that you wanted to pick up and be a master at right away, it's not going to be the best system for you. And there's very few systems that are like that. Even like the PBTA or the Rules Lights one, still take a little bit while to get used to. So that's really one of the biggest things I will say if you're new to the system and kind of getting overwhelmed with all the rules and different resources on there. Just run it. Like if you watch my actual play, there were callings I got wrong, rules I got wrong, just things I had to just go with the flow to make the game keep going. Just do that. Like nobody's like, the Paizo's not going to come to your door like, hey, you're playing this wrong. Try to learn the rules as you go and try to make sure you kind of get closer to playing it right as you go along. But the main goal of playing a tabletop RPG is to have fun. So if you mess up a rule, if you mess up something, just keep going, keep having fun, look it up after you play, and if it's you find that you don't like the official rule, throw it out after careful consideration, but otherwise just add it in, say, hey, I wrote it this way at the time, looking up at the rules, this is how you should play it. But overall, yeah, this really isn't, there's not too many thorns. The last real big thorn I'll say, and this one really doesn't apply to me too much since I usually play virtually, but gosh, I love the level up proficiency bumps where we can add your levels to your train, mastery, and all those types of skills. But if I was writing this by hand, that would be so annoying because it's one of those ones, every level up you have to go through and erase all of your proficiencies and put them in again. Definitely I've already looked up and found some cool automated sheets that would do that for you but could still print off nicely. But it's one of those things I wanted to mention because, yeah, I could see how people would get annoyed with that, as I would get annoyed with that. But really cool, especially if you're on a virtual tabletop or have something that can automate the sheets for you. It allows you to feel that progression, allows you to kind of feel like you're better than you were a level before, which I feel like some systems, sometimes you don't feel that progression. So real big shout out for that. So those are the thorns for the system. Couple of buds things I'm excited for. A lot of the GMG stuff. There's so many of like those tools that they gave and like subsystems you can add on to the game that I'm really looking forward to run. I'm looking forward to building more hazards. I'm looking forward to using the infiltration and chase scenes. Like I'm looking forward to using the kind of how they have like the vehicle setup. They've got a whole vehicles and rules in there. There's just so much cool shit in there that I've wanted to use in other games. I've had to homebrew, but I'm looking forward to trying it with theirs and see how it works. So that's just a big bud. You're going to see that as the channel goes along. I'm going to be doing some more Pathfinder 2e one-shots as I wait for my campaign to end. It should be about a month or so. So stay tuned for those. Those are going to be coming up because it's just that every page or everything I saw within the GMG, I was like, oh, this is cool. I can have some fun with it. So I'm looking forward to tying those out. Just having a little bit more fun on that side. So last big thing I will say with the buds is that there's I'm just looking forward to diving in and just play more of this system, just kind of doing more different encounters, different styles of encounters, and really putting the rule set to its test because there's like so many different there's guidelines and tips for so many different things. I'm really just looking forward to applying them, seeing how they work out, and even compare them a little bit to the homebrew that I've worked with myself before, to see how they stack up. Because I've really been impressed with everything Paizo's put out with this system, and just I think it's kind of one of the gold standards in the world, just for like the care, the level of precision that they've done with the math on this side. Like I don't know if they have like a whole team of statisticians, but they've really like worked it out well and make it so that the classes are balanced within each other, as well as balanced against the monsters, and everything just kind of flows well. Like magic and casters working well. The fighter feel like a beast in its own right. Even compared to the guy that's warping reality is perfect. That's another rose too I'll give. The marshals and casters feel balanced, and marshals get ridiculous feats they can do too. So like it's not like you're just a guy with a sword versus the guy that's over there bending reality. Like you're a Herculean Titan leaping mountains, scaring people to death with the guy that's warping reality. So you hold your own and you're having fun with that. So another big shout out on that side too. But overall, those are the roses, the thorns, and buds. The last thing I'll say for cool things to take away from the system, and I've already talked a lot of these, so I won't hype them up too much. Go check out the Game Master Guide. Look at their subsystems, though, especially if you're somebody that's still sticking with 5e, which is it's a great system on its own, and definitely we're right there. Go check it out. That Game Mastery Guide, I think, is a better resource for the things that are non-system specific overall, with how to kind of build worlds and settlements, but even with subsystems like the infiltration and chase scenes and all of those, I think those would be easy to convert over and switch them to D&D numbers and have a really well built system for it. It won't be like it'll flow as smoothly, but it would work really well, and it gives you a framework for building them versus having to come up against it on your own. And that's true just not for just 5e, but for other different systems as well. These are kind of cool rules you could stick in there, have them work, and be able to kind of have dynamic encounters without having to homebrew them all yourself. But overall, love this system, and thank you guys for coming through and watching our videos with these ones too. Just really had a blast going into it. For next month, February, we're doing a new game. We're going to be running Avatar Legends. I thought it'd be kind of cool to go. We've went from a little bit crunchy with the Pathfinder 2e to get the PVATA style with the Avatar Legends. I love the show, so it should be pretty fun, a little bit light and fun on that side too. So stick tuned with us. We're going to have our first impressions up next week, and then as always in the regular format. But overall, like, subscribe, especially if you're new to the channel. Each month we do a different tabletop RPG, with January's being Pathfinder and February being Avatar Legends. So come through, hang out with us, and get a chance to see the wider world of TTRPGs. But yeah, like, subscribe, and until next time.